Okay, this is part one of two videos where we're going to be looking at the customization options for form layout and the different features that we have that allow you to change the way forms look. The first thing that we're going to be looking at are title fields. A title field is what you see at the top of a record when you click on the record. You can see here that we have for the tickets, we have a title that says running low on coffee, please order some more. This actually corresponds to the field that's called title, but it doesn't have to. What WorkflowFirst does is in your tab or your record, it'll actually pick up the first string or text field that's in your record and use that as a title by default. But you can override that and actually specify that a particular field is a title field. You can see here that we've already done this for the title field itself, and we say is title field yes, but that doesn't have to be the case. So if we just change that and we go to display settings and we change the is title field and we set that to no, and instead we can make let's say the originator the title field. So we edit the originator field, go to display settings and say is title field yes. Okay, let's publish that, and it will give you an idea of how we can change this. So I refresh this here. Now you should see immediately that it now says at the top admin, because now it's using the originator field for the title instead of the field called title. You can choose any field you like in here. You can have a calculated field, which is actually a combination of two different fields. So that's one way that we can actually change the title field. One thing that's worth mentioning is that the title field will always show up in the list, even if you specify that you want it hidden from a list. Worth keeping that in mind. It's considered to be an important field, which is why it's always included in the list. Let me just go back and change that. If I actually just set this to no and republish, it would still use the originator field, because if there are no title fields selected, it uses the first text field, which happens to be originator in this case. But we'll go ahead and put the title one back. Okay, that's one element of customization that we have. Another one is the tooltips or the help text that we have associated with different fields. Right now we don't have anything specified here. But if I go to, for example, let's say look at one that's unusual, like the URL, we edit this. If we go to the description text and put something in here like some help text, the URL containing more information, and we update that. Now let's publish that, and I'll show you where that actually shows up. Okay, now I put the cursor over URL and you see how it now says the URL containing more information. Now you can put help text called tooltips on any of your fields, and it will show up right there. It will it will also show up in the list at the top if you put your cursor over a particular heading. So that's very useful, because often the field names are quite short to not to clutter up the display. So it allows you to really put more information in there about that particular field and what it means. It's quite useful. Okay, for the next part of what I'm going to explain, I'm going to create a much larger form, because this isn't a particularly large form. So to do that, I'm going to create a different type of tab containing some product information that we can use. So right now we have our tickets tab. I'm going to actually add a product tab, and the product tab is going to have information about products that this help desk type application is going to be supporting. So this is just going to be a database. It's not going to be a workflow, because WorkflowFirst lets you create both, either a database through Workflow, or just a database by itself. So we're just going to go ahead and create a database by itself. So we're going to click New Application tab to add a new application, and we're going to call this Products. Okay, and we're just going to enter the fields at the bottom of the Application tab right here. So we'll call product name. Let me just go to the main list here. Okay, product name, type, discontinued. That's another one. Date introduced. You'll notice that I'm using a code or symbol at the end of these. This is actually a quick way to set the data type. If there's an @ sign at the end, it's the same as clicking date time general right here. If it's a let's see what other ones. If it's a question mark, then it will be a Boolean. If it is an exclamation mark, then it's a number, a floating point number. There are a few of them, and you'll see them as I'm entering them. So date introduced, date discontinued. Again, I'm putting @ right there. You see how it goes in as date time general. I'm also using Alt Q to get to the quick entry, because that's actually a quick way of getting you to the quick entry line through the keyboard. Manufacturing code, internal product code, the UPC and the EAN, inventory remaining, the inventory on order, reorder date. Let's see what else we can add. Sorry, sales per day. Oops. You notice also that if I enter something in with spaces, it automatically creates a name for you without spaces in. The name is actually what you would use in scripting or calculation or formula, which cannot have spaces in. It leaves the field title as you typed it in and creates a name that can be used from scripting. It does that automatically. Okay, the recommended retail price, dollar here. Dollar means a money type. Let's see, partner retail price, manufacture cost, requires assembly. What else? Warehouse. Put in some warehouses of where it's actually made or stored, and an image, which is going to be a file. I use the the hat symbol there to specify file. So that'll be a file that can be entered in. And now this is our main form, and you see it's gone onto 2 pages, so I can click next page and see that. We're also going to add a parts database underneath this too. So to do that, I'm just going to type in parts and put 3 greater than signs. What that is actually, what that does is a shortcut for specifying a nested list. So I click parts there. I click on the next page. Now you see that parts shows up as nested list. It's also bold to show you that it's a subform or a sublist. I can click plus on here and it will go to the nested fields underneath parts inside products. So that can be useful. I'm going to add a part code, a name, a manufacturer, and a cost. You could add more under here too. You could have like a cost history, for example, if you wanted to. Expand that and we'll put date and price right there. Okay, so we've created a little database now of products. Let's publish that and see what it looks like. And refresh this. Okay, so now we have a products tab at the top as well. So let's click on that and we'll click plus to add a new product. Remember, there's no workflow. Because there's no workflow, it's just a basic database. You can just add records, you can delete records, you can edit records, update them. But there's no buttons that actually ask you for information. It's just a basic form. So I click plus and it brings up the form that it automatically created for us. So we have, you know, the name, type, etc. All the fields are laid out in 4 columns, which is the default. You'll notice that we also have our parts as an expandable link down here. That lets us actually enter in each of the parts as we're entering in the product. So we can break it down. We can even put in the cost history for those parts as we're entering in the whole thing. So this is the layout that it gives you automatically, but that's not actually what we want to have, because that's a little bit it's a little bit cluttered, and I'd like to have things, you know, laid out a little more in groups, in logical groups that make sense, to make it easier to look at and fill out. So the thing that we're going to be looking at right now is basically grouping the fields together, so we can put things into some kind of sense. So to do that, we're going to go back to our product list of fields, and we're going to change some of the fields. So to do grouping, you basically change the group title associated with the field. You see the same thing when you're entering in workflow. You'll see a group name in the input field section of a stage. You put in the group name there, and it will be reflected in the form also. So you specify a group title in the field whenever you want to start a new group. So we're going to put we're going to start a new group underneath. Let's see. Underneath here, we're going to call this product active. Okay, and I'm looking at the fields now. Now here we have some codes, so I'm going to edit the manufacturing code and change the group title to be codes. So there's a 2 at least. Another one would be inventory right here. So we type in the group title, inventory. And then we have some miscellaneous things, so we'll just put misc right there. So let's publish this and see what that looks like. I can just refresh the form that I'm looking at. Okay, so now you'll see that we have 3 fields under product active. We have 4 fields under codes and 3 fields under inventory. So it starts a new line, effectively, a new row of fields every time a group starts, and it puts it under this grey heading, product active, codes, inventory, miscellaneous. Okay, that's a good start. But one feature that you can do in order to declutter the screen is actually to make these groups collapsible. Collapsible groups can basically be hidden by default, and then you click on them and they'll be expanded. So in this case, we want to look at something which may not necessarily be necessary, and then we can make it collapsible. In this case, we're going to make the inventory collapsible. So we go to the inventory, the field that has the inventory title on it, and we add a flag to that field called collapsed group. So let's add that. It's at the bottom conveniently, and publish that. Go back here and refresh. Okay, so now you see we have product active, we have codes, but the inventory section has a little down arrow at the end, and there's nothing underneath it. When we click on it, we see that the entries appear under there, and we click it again and they disappear. So that's actually quite a good way to collapse sort of too much detailed information, perhaps things that they won't enter in every single time they're using it. You can collapse those and hide them away so that it's clearer. And I mean, in WorkflowFirst we use the same thing. We have different sections for fields. You click edit, you can see here we have display settings, entry settings. We hide those away so that we don't clutter up the screen with too much information, because that can be confusing. When you have too much information, it can overwhelm users, and it makes it harder to use. Okay, so I'm going to also add the same flag to miscellaneous, so we can see just how decluttered the form can become. Okay, so now we have inventory and we have miscellaneous, which expands a lot of information. Okay, now as I mentioned, by default it lays everything out in 4 columns. You can actually increase that so that we have a different number of columns if you like. You can have 5 columns or 6 columns. Of course, it makes the fields narrower if you do that. They won't be as wide, and you may run into some problems with certain drop downs that won't fit on the screen in that case. But to solve this problem, we have something called spanning, which is actually a new feature, so you have to have the latest version to use this. But you can specify a span on a particular field. So if I go back to my field list, we can make the product name span two columns perhaps, because we want the product name to be very large. So we just click edit on the product name. On the display settings area, we'll see there's a span down here. We can just set that to 2. Click enter. Let's publish that and we'll see how that looks. Okay, now you see that the product name spans 2, so it's much wider, twice as large as it was before. And that can be very useful. Now, certain fields are too wide as they are already. Discontinued would be an example of a field that is perhaps too wide already. So the span actually allows you to use fractions as well. So you can put discontinued as half size to span 0.5 to make it smaller. So we're going to do that now. So we go to the date discontinued. Was that the one? Sorry, no, discontinued, not that field. We go to discontinued, display settings, and we set this to 0.5. 0.5 being a half of a column. Then we come over here and refresh this. And now we see it's moved everything over because the discontinued only takes up half of a column. So this allows you really to have much more flexibility in how the forms are laid out. You're not stuck to the usual 4 columns. In actual fact, what you really have here, because of the half columns, you really have 8 columns. So you can say that a field takes up 1.5 columns, and it will lay it out accordingly. So that can be extremely useful if you have complex forms with lots of different sized fields. If you want to change the actual or override the size of a particular form, you can go to the application tab or the nested list, whichever. You click ... go to advanced, and in here you can specify the form horizontal fields. This allows you to override the maximum number of fields that fit horizontally in a form, and the default is 4. So you can specify 5 if you want to, and it will just add more fields to that particular row. If you want to change the font size, you can also do that. You can change it under the list font size. You can change the font size of the whole application, as we discussed in the previous video, and you can make the whole application wider. So that really allows you to have a lot of different options for layout. It's quite flexible with the new spanning feature that we have. There's another way actually to span all of the whole column all the way along, which if that's 4, you would normally put in 4, but maybe you want to be independent from the number of columns that are specified. So to do that, you can just go to a particular field. Let's say, I don't know, let's look at one. UPC, for example. If you click on that and add a flag type called extra large, extra large tells it to automatically span the whole row instead of just using one column, sorry. So now if I refresh this, you'll see that UPC now spans the whole of the row. So that can be a quick way to actually span all of the columns, regardless of how many columns are actually defined. Okay, that's enough for this particular part. We're going to be going into more detail of other layout customization features in the next part of this video. Thanks.